Hi, this is Aaron Bhaskar from BKBB, which is an avatar of Bhaskar ki business baatein. BKBB concentrates on news, not exactly news, but news behind the news. We pick up headlines that we think are most interesting and we analyze them and look a little further than what the headlines tell you. Our parent channel continues to do its policy analysis, its business stories, and its conversations as before. But this is a recent development. We've just finished our fourth week, and this is the 20th episode. On Monday, we'll have the beginning of the fifth week. Keep on logging in every morning of the weekday at 8:15 a.m. Okay. Today, we are going to talk about various stories which in many ways talk about the global scenario. And of course, I have my co-anchor with me, Katya. Welcome, Katya. And together, both of us will we'll analyze at least three headlines. I will take up the first headline because of two reasons. But before I do my headlines, let me tell you the three headlines that we'll talk about. The first one is on the automobile sector, the auto sector. Everyone is waiting with bated breath for the 2nd April deadline when the Trump tariffs kick in. There are many consequences. We'll talk about them. The second one is a very interesting stories of how people become wealthy and how Shanghai has become richer with more billionaires than Mumbai. And the third one is again, as USA creates tremors around the world, China suddenly looks very appealing for more than one reason. Let's go to the first story. The first story is about the automobile shivers. Every automobile company is worried about the April 2 effect, when automobile and the components are going to be slapped with a 25% duty. And there are the chart of companies which are going to be affected because of the duty. When these duties kick in, it means that companies will not be able to export as much as before. And some of the companies are big exporters. They might lose revenues. If they can't export, it's quite possible that the domestic sales will also become more expensive because they won't have economies of scale. That in turn might further impact the offtake of automobiles in India. And you think India has problems? The creator of these tariffs, the US, has its own set of problems. Just look at this chart from Bloomberg. Now, this chart tells you how the largest selling cars in USA are cars that are not made in USA. US companies have preferred to manufacture larger cars because that is where they make big amounts of money. All the smaller cars are largely imported, which means in April 2, all these cars become expensive for the poorer classes, for the middle classes, and those are numerically very, very large. Expect a large chunk of the US population to be furious as prices go up. And this is even without considering the impact of tariffs that will come from Canada as it imposes its tariffs on electricity and aluminium. They plan to retaliate, so expect the US consumer to be very, very badly hit. Let's see what happens. But these are interesting times. Europe is shivering, India is shivering, and the US consumer is going to feel the shivers very soon. And that will have political repercussions. We go to the second story, and the second story is by Katya.
Good morning. Thank you, sir. Again, a very interesting topic, billionaires and billions. So, last year, India took the billionaire capital of Asia from Beijing. Now, this year, it has lost it to Shanghai. It's a couple of billionaires here and there. But if you look at, the whole talk around India being the brightest spot across the country, this data tells you a little bit differently. If you look at it, India had had 27 dropouts while 45 new entrants, which means the net addition was only 18. And then there is 119 have seen wealth decrease or the wealth has remained same. 130 have seen wealth increase, obviously. And if you see the percentage change of total wealth, and if you compare it to the other countries, USA has seen a large amount of it. China and India are pretty much in the same list. So just looking at the numbers, if you look at it, if you see, there are London, there is USA, there are a lot in terms of cities, New York, etc. But if you actually see, China has two entrants. It has got Beijing and it's got Shanghai, and both of them are 90 to 91 billionaires each, which means it's much ahead of us. And if you see the biggest gainer by amount of wealth, it's Gautam Adani and family. You see 13% increase in wealth. In fact, it is the top most wealth gainer amongst billionaires for the year. And the biggest gainer by percentage in India is Irfan Razak. He's the Prestige Estates chairman. So it also shows that, a lot of things that we've seen in the last 2 years, the bull run, the stock market bull run, etc., might be tapering down, or it actually it has to sustain at this levels for us to hold on to our for our billionaires to hold on to their billions very very well, because we've also seen a amount of dropouts which shows that things can go either ways even for them. So back to you, sir. What do you think? Will our billionaires will be able to hold on to their billions, or there'll
Doesn't
be
know. Katya, it's a very interesting story how money is made. And I have a little theory of my own. It's a theory that wealth comes when you generate wealth. I look at the story of TMFI and the syndicate bank, how 25 paise allowed a whole entire district to blossom. Money at the power at the bottom of the pyramid. China is going to grow richer because it has created money at the bottom.
right?
India has to create that. And let's see what happens. But yes, the story of the rich that you brought out, and Hurun does it regularly, is a good story. It's an eye opener how wealth travels. Thank you, Katya. And now we go to the third story, which is again on USA and China. The story is interesting because even while, let's take the second title first. Even while the heat temperatures go up because of the US tariffs, many people don't realize that the largest selling air conditioners and compressors in India are today made by Chinese companies. People know about the mobile phones, but they don't know about air conditioners. So in a way, China has become very attractive, not because of any other reason, but because they make the air conditioners and refrigerators in India. For instance, very few people know again that Haier, which is a Chinese company, was number 3. It's inching up to be number 2. It's acquiring companies, air conditioning companies and refrigeration companies around the world. The best brands are now Chinese brands. Okay. While this is going on, there's another development which creates shivers, and that's a third story on the screen, and that is many students have decided not to come back to India for their vacations. They're scared that they come to India and suddenly the US changes some law or the other. They may not be able to go back to their studies. They've already paid the fees. So they're telling the parents, I don't think it's advisable to come back home this time for the vacations because there could be trouble. If that is there, there's a third area which has become very interesting. Starlink wants to come to India, but Starlink is not trusted by China or Russia. In fact, if you remember very clearly, when the Ukraine war began, Starlink offered its services to Ukraine, and Russia told them, if you come to Ukraine, we'll treat this as a weapon of war and we'll blast your satellites off from the sky. And Starlink decided not to go ahead with its plans. Starlink wants to be in India. Both Airtel and Reliance have agreed to partner with Starlink. The big question is, will Russia and China make angry sounds to tell India that this move may not be welcome? Or two, will India use Starlink as a bargaining chip with the USA to win concessions for India? One hope India does it. One hope Indian industry is protected from America. But let us see what happens. And that, in a way, brings me to the end of today's news broadcast. And just a reminder, please click the subscribe button. Please click the like button. It thrills us enormously when we see more likes. And lastly, please tell your friends about this. We are doing some very interesting things, and we'd like more people to know about what we are doing. And yes, now I can see some questions coming in. And the first question is, when will this tariff madness end? It will end when someone starts bleeding badly. The counter to Trump's tariffs has not yet taken effect. I do not know when it will come in. But if Canada increases its duties on electricity, remember most of the automobile manufacturers in America are in North America, and they make cars there because they get cheap electricity from Canada, which is perhaps one of the biggest players in the hydro sector. When power becomes expensive, US automobile sector companies will also start screaming for help. Second thing, Canada sells its aluminium to America, which in turn helps it make planes and cars and other things besides. When Canada increases tariffs, watch the trouble. And when Mexico stops selling its cars into America, the cheaper cars, watch the public scream. Very interesting times. Someone is going to get hurt. India has decided that the best strategy is to quietly lie down and let the storm blow over. I don't know whether that's a wise policy. But every other country has decided to retaliate, including China. Russia may see its sanctions removed because Trump wants to end the Ukraine war. Very interesting times. Let's see what happens. Next one. Can An interesting question. Can India regain its leadership among the rich? Interesting question. But Katya, what do you think about it?
So, like I said, sir, Mumbai had become the billionaire capital. So, and then it was competing. India took the crown from Beijing, and now the baton has passed to Shanghai, which means China, in country-wise, it is already twice as many of billionaires in kind of cities. And if you look
Excellent
at
point.
the
Yes.
yes, if you look at the data, also we are way behind. So the total number of billionaires in China, if you look at all the cities, is 823. India is at 284. So we had celebrated too fast, and it was a 1 year blip that we have seen. And then India, even China has a significant number of dropouts as well, but its number of additions are also much higher. The capital goes from one sector to another depending on the policies of the day. With the trade war coming, with the stock markets going down, I don't think, because India is lot more, it's not decoupled like you always say from the international situation anymore. So I just don't buy into the bright spot across the world. Back to you, sir.
Interesting. Very interesting. And yes, there's a third question that's coming in. And the third question is, uh, do you think that India will become old before becoming young? Well, before becoming rich and developed? India is already becoming old. If you look at the graph, the young population has started tapering off. It's still growing, but the number of old are increasing, is increasing. Now, when the old start increasing, it increases the cost of Medicare, it increases the cost of old senior homes, and I don't think India is prepared for it. So India may become poorer as the old increase in number, and India has not yet learned the art of generating wealth as quickly as other countries have. And there's one more question. Shouldn't India be more welcoming to China and other ASEAN countries? Of course. It's a point that we've been making all the time. If the US is growing at 5-6%, Vietnam is growing 100%. The entire ASEAN is growing at 40%. The fastest growing region and also the wealthiest region now, in the soon to be, is the ASEAN region. India should be exporting to ASEAN because they are both exporters as well as importers. India should move away from the West because the West has no money to spend. And so, if you want to sell, you'll have to sell to the South, to Africa, and to the East. India desperately needs to change its export strategy. And yes, do tune in on Monday. That is when our 5th week begins. And we look forward to seeing you. And keep sending in your questions. And do click the subscribe button, the like button, and most important, tell your friends about us. Thank you once again. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself.